How many days did it take to create a Matterport digital twin of the 400,000 square foot Kobe Convention Center? What was the pricing strategy for such a super large space? In addition to Matterport, what other platforms, cameras, and software were used for the Kobe Convention Center? Stay tuned. Hi all, I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum. Today is Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. You're watching WGAN TV Live at 5, a podcast for digital twin creators shaping the future of real estate today. We have an awesome show for you. How to create a Matterport digital twin of a 400,000 square foot convention center. Our guest today is Osaka-based Daniel Brown, president of Maidansha Inc. Daniel,
Hi.
thank you for being back on the show.
Hi, thank you.
Daniel, before we dive into today's topic, tell us about Maidansha today.
So Maidansha is a 3D company that makes 3D spatial imaging for businesses and helps to create the digital twins that they need for their work. Also, we make predominantly virtual tours for the building and tourism industries in Japan.
And the kind of categories of clients?
So predominantly it's hotels. Also, it's for building companies, such as residential building companies. Japan has a very big market for new homes. So the companies require our services to give a display of previous homes that they've built, which are used when clients and potential clients contact them online for costings and for general information about the company. So we sort of help them make that first step of connecting with their potential customers.
And some other categories of clients?
So for instance, we've done work in the past year for, apart from hotels, tourism, we've done work for MICE, which is meetings, incentives, conventions and events. So that's particularly what we're going to be talking about today.
Awesome. And your coverage area in Japan is?
So Japan's not a very big country, so we can cover the whole country. So most of our work is centered around where I am in Osaka this past year. But in years gone by, we've done work pretty evenly across the country. So yeah, we cover the whole country.
And the kinds of virtual tours, we know Matterport, but are there other platforms, other cameras that you're using as well?
Yes, so we check with the client to see what they need first. Often they don't know the jargon or the company branding names, etc. So we make sure that they want 3D or whether they want high quality, high resolution 360 photograph, etc. So we can do, when we talk about it from a specialist side, we can use 3D Vista, we can use QPix, we can use Matterport, as you mentioned before. Pretty much, if the client wants it and we have the equipment on hand, we'll do whatever it is they want.
Great. Can you show us the Kobe Convention Center in Osaka?
Sure.
And for the purpose of showing and telling us about the Kobe Convention Center, why don't we just assume that I have a conference, I'm in the United States, and I'm traveling I have an expected turnout of 50,000 people, and this is both a conference and exhibition. So I can see your screen. Perhaps you could walk me through the Kobe Convention Center with that lens of anticipation of 50,000 attendees, conference and exhibit.
So I imagine that the staff that asked me to make the tour in the first place are watching today. So I can't give the same kind of level of sales expertise here. But the requests that we had to make the tour, I can explain in reference to 50,000 people coming. So first of all, you would have to see it on a greater map of the Kobe City area. But the facility is built on a man-made island which stretches out from Kobe City, and it's connected by this line you can see in the middle here. This is a monorail, and it has a station right centered, excuse me, centered in the middle. So the monorail moves, I think, every 5 minutes or so. There's a 5 to 10 minutes. There's a monorail train that comes. And so at the end of the island, there is an airport, which is not shown here. And at the base of the island, there is the main city area for Kobe, which is centered around an area called Sannomiya. Now, from there, people would come to the train area here, the train station. And on what is the east side here, the right side, would be the Kobe Convention, the Kobe International Meeting Hall would be the correct name for this in English. So it's about 8,000 square meters of floor space, and has numerous rooms for smaller and larger meetings, as well as a great big theater in the on the basement to first floor here. Also, for international visitors, though it's not featured in the tour, this is a hotel. It's called Kobe Portopia Hotel. Perhaps at some point in the future, there may be an expression of interest from them. And on the left side, which is actually the west side of the man-made island, we have 3 white buildings here. They are the Kobe International Exhibition Halls 1, 2, and 3. These vary in size, but the biggest is number 2, followed by 1 and then 3. These can all, on their own, host huge exhibitions, but collectively they can be used as well, from what I understand.
Daniel, when I've been given tours of convention spaces, I've never seen this whole rotation that you were doing here. Even before I get into the tour, I was just curious to see this space.
Are you talking about this?
Yes, yes.
Yes, so I think this is one of the things that helped the people at the convention center make the decision to go with Meidanta's offer as opposed to other businesses, because there was competition.
Yes,
for this particular job.
actually, we'll talk about that. If you just assume I'm trying to bring my convention to an international convention, so I'm just
Sure.
curious the Kobe Convention Center and its capabilities here.
Sure. Oh, yeah. So people who open this, it's intended as a landing page, can open it and then they can move it around if they want to. But really, it's just intended as a landing page. From here, they can press any of these 4 buttons, or they can click the Japanese writing at the top here of these sort of markers, which you can see stay anchored. I've prepared ahead of time the links. So if you open one of them, like let's say we opened this one, it would display something like this. This is the Kobe International Meeting Hall. So we're starting actually from the top floor at the request of the client. If we zoom back out again into the what Matterport calls the dollhouse mode, you can see we can do the same kind of how do I say, functionality as we could with the overall scene, the outdoor exterior scene, and except that now you can see the inside of the building. So we can break this up to see separate floors. For instance, starting from the basement floor, you can see the theater that I mentioned earlier, and other floors appear sort of half faded out, but we can zoom in particularly.
Can we take a look at those spaces, the theater and the
Sure.
to the theater?
So if we enter the theater by double clicking, We can now see from the audience's view what the theatre looks like, and also the view of the screen. And if we dive to the front, we can actually see from the people on stages what they would see here. Obviously, the lights are very bright, so it does actually cause some lens flaring with the camera we used. But you can see also behind the scenes too. So we checked closely with the staff to see just how much they wanted shown. And they were quite happy with showing just what the green room, for instance, looks like, what it looks like behind the stage, to give people who are considering using the show an idea of just what kind of facilities are available.
Yes, that's helpful for us to understand the wings and what equipment, gear, space is backstage.
Yes, so I think that just about concludes what's on this floor, but it does actually, you can actually see the waiting areas that the staff would be using, as well as the green room, etc.
Except the
There
green
are,
room doesn't look green.
yeah, VIP room. Yeah. So I could get into detail talking about this from a scanning technician's point of view, but I will just stick to what the user sees. So you can see this is the waiting area where people would go in and out before and during the show. And if we go one more floor up, we can see the foyer like this. The building itself is about 30 years old, I think, but it has new attachments here and there. It's very well maintained. So yeah, you can see some things that sort of, how do I say, it's nostalgic in some places, yes. But overall, being that I spent a lot of time in this area, in this building, I can say that it's a very, very well maintained building. Was there anything else you would like to see in the building?
I'd like to see the exhibit space, the expo spaces.
Sure. Well, this particular building was intended for meetings, but if we go to one of the
Well, did you have
exhibition spaces,
were there other meeting spaces within this building? We do have
sure.
some small breakout room needs for breakout rooms, conference rooms,
Sure.
classroom.
If we use this menu or the dollhouse feature, as I showed before, we can move to different rooms. So for instance, if we go to the menu, we can see some of the meeting rooms. Like if I click 401 here,
Mhm.
we're instantly transported to 401, which is this kind of, regular run-of-the-mill kind of meeting room. This one is laid out just for what they would call a school type of meeting here in Japan.
Yes.
Whereas they have other rooms with multiple layouts. If I zoom to one of those using the menu again. So, for instance, if we go to 405, just down the hallway, smaller room, but this at the moment is laid out in this sort of round format. But if we click this button, we can see another school format. Like this. And in places, there are rooms set up with a projector. So you can see what they call a theatre format. So if we go to 403, again, we have the round format. But if we click the button, it gives us a view of what it looks like if it's set up for viewing a slideshow or something like that. And otherwise, with regard to these buttons, we've used them to show photographs of the exterior. We've also used them to show small PDFs of what the map of the building looks like. So if we go to one of those, okay, I would have to go to a separate building to show you that. But for instance, this
Um,
is one of the exhibition halls.
yes, thank you.
Yeah. And the exhibition halls all have provided, they were separately managed, but they all provided some PDFs of floor plans. So for instance, we go to the second floor, they have a floor plan like this, which they provided in PDF form with some simple explanation here. And PDFs, for those familiar with the software MPM Bed, will know that they can open in a separate tab like this. And being PDFs, they can be downloaded as well. And the exhibition hall features the same kind of
How many
functionality.
exhibition halls, expo spaces are there within the three buildings? Is that literally just three
Okay,
very large?
so from memory, this is the first exhibition hall. It has two exhibition spaces. So you can see here, when we look at it in 3D, the ground floor is here, two roughly the same sized exhibition spaces. The one on the ground first floor has a much higher ceiling, about close to 15, 20 meters, I think. And it's supported by these large concrete columns, whereas the second floor is completely open. The ceiling is a bit lower. You saw the second floor just now. If we just give you a quick look at the first floor, it's like this. Then in the other two exhibition halls, there is one large exhibition space each. The second hall is the largest of all of them. We just give you a look at that. You can see that this floor space is massive. This is the largest space of all of the buildings that I scanned in this complex. The echo in there is pretty amazing. If there is nothing going on in there, if there's no chairs or anything placed, it echoes about 5 or 6 times. So the third hall is a newer but smaller hall, but still nonetheless very big. This is the final space. So you can just see by the number of lights that we're talking at least 30 meters, I guess, across by about 70 or 80 meters wide, I think, just from memory.
And is there a floor plan for this space? Yep.
Yeah, the floor plan, I initially, if we talk slightly from a specialist point of view, initially I tried to include this floor plan as the background map here that you see, but there were some issues with the size of the space's exterior and the size of the floor plan to make that a little bit
All
difficult.
right, we'll talk about that in a
Yeah.
moment. Can I see where the loading bays are?
Sure. This one has very large loading bays, so we can see what the exterior looks like by clicking one of these tags, and then we get this view, the loading bay area. Actually, there's an interesting story behind this photograph, but do we have time for it? I'm not sure.
We'll come back. Is
Sure.
there anything else about the space itself, about the Kobe Convention Center? We've looked at expo halls, we looked at classrooms, we looked at the foyers into the spaces. We looked at the overview of all 4 buildings. Before we take it off screen share and talk about the project, is there anything else to show in terms of the space?
In terms of the space, so I've shown 3 functionalities, which I sort of hoped that people would pick up on. One was the exterior, like this.
Yeah.
Then, of course, there was people are much familiar with the Matterport
Yeah. All right.
interiors.
Let tell you what, let's
Yeah,
take it off screen share and we'll talk
sure.
about the project. That'd be great. Cool. Thank you. We're ready to book our 50,000 attendees and expo. Who do I need to talk to?
I would put you in touch with the Kobe Convention Center management team, and I think you'll find our tour and a lot of information on their website about that.
Thank you. So, and what has been the react? This is 400,000 square feet. I believe you did this project in available publicly April 2024.
That's correct.
What's been the reaction of the Kobe Convention Center team?
In the lead up to this interview, I actually asked them in detail about these things. As I expected, they were very happy with what they got from the tour. But importantly for me, myself, not just the people who asked me from the management team, but also the people on the ground who use the tour too, are also finding it very useful for assisting in their daily work there.
I imagine there's many different use cases of this tour. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Okay, so initially what they were looking for was they wanted, just one moment, sorry. Initially what they were looking for was the ability for people remote to be able to see what the facilities are like. So they could grasp, just the size and the amenities available, etc., that sort of thing. And they would have situations where they would have people come on site to look, and they would spend time showing them around the facility. And as you could see before from the exterior view, it's a very, very large area. So this viewing takes, close to an hour sometimes. So they wanted it to facilitate the viewing for people who couldn't come on site, either from time restrictions or because they were too far away. And sometimes, if it's a big organization that wants to use the facility, they may have some people local who come on site, but other people who are in the decision-making process who are off-site. So they wanted to be able to share that information with both people on and off-site. That was the main functionality that they were looking for. But after actually receiving the tour, they tell me that they're also using it internally as well. So for instance, to facilitate communication between people who work on site. So, I mean, it's easy to say it's that thing over there, but, without the specifics, it's kind of hard to know exactly where in the complex they're talking about. So they can use the tour to explain these things to each other when they're in a meeting. I also explain to them, if we talk about the specialist dynamics of the Matterport tour, how to use deep links to explain these things in meetings, etc. And they were very happy with that. And also,
I think I'm hearing three things. One is for sales purposes,
that's
talking
correct.
to potential clients internationally that may or may not travel to Osaka to look at the facilities. And it may be that showing the tour is what leads to getting an in-person appointment to take it to the next step. I think what I'm also hearing is marketing in general to lead to potential leads that then lead to coming to Osaka to visit in person and have meetings.
Kobe.
Forgive me.
It's kind of like a New York, New Jersey relationship.
I'm so sorry, Kobe. I don't know why I have Osaka on my brain here.
No problem.
Kobe. So and then I think the third brushstroke that I'm hearing is from, okay, we've booked our space, but now we have a planning need. operationally. And that may be taking measurements, that may be doing a virtual walkthrough. So operationally, it's being used as well.
That's correct. They mentioned layouts as well. So yeah, that's the kind of operational use that they're using it for.
And I could imagine that part of that is deciding, okay, are we setting it up as classroom style? Are we setting it up in some other meeting style? And being able to take measurements in order to determine, can you put in 20 rows, 50 rows, whatever it might be, in that style?
That's correct. They did specifically mention the measurement tool as being useful.
As being powerful. Okay, sales, marketing, operations. Any other use cases that that your client has identified?
So to date, I have heard these only, but I imagine there's other little uses that they have that come up from time to time.
Mm-hmm. This really is an extraordinary project. I would imagine that it's actually is already led to additional business for Maydantia for your company.
Yes, so it does draw a lot of attention, and from what I understand, these publicly run facilities do actually talk to each other. So in different cities and different, well, we call them prefectures here, but you would call them states. So they had an inquiry about how the tour was made from another more distant state prefecture, and through them we got a referral to that particular place. So we can't say with certainty when, but they're very positive on doing something similar for their complex as well.
Awesome. I know in general we said Matterport, but there's lots of different platforms, software, cameras that were used in the creation of this tour. Could you talk to us about that?
Sure. So initially what I showed you was the exterior view. That was made using 3D Vista as a kind of a landing page. I've used 3D Vista to make complete tours before, but it sort of, in this particular case, fills a gap that's hard to fill with Matterport. So the exterior of buildings, while not impossible with Matterport, is very, very time consuming and also difficult. So yeah, just using that exterior visual was something that helped me get the contract, and also it helped them to sort of show just how convenient the facilities actually are.
Mm-hmm.
The actual visual itself is what you want to know.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So the visual itself comes from Google Map or Google Earth. It's a sort of a three-dimensional screenshot. Since then, Google has released some kind of mapping tiles API, but ours was sort of predating that. So we have like a still screenshot of what the scene looked like on Google Map circa mid last year. So at the time we had to sort of supply referrals to the places, to the companies that made the original data. So that included Google as well as Airbus and a few other companies. So that's all denoted in the tour. So with those hurdles covered, we had an exterior shot of the building area. I would have loved to have made that using, say, photogrammetry or something like that, but unfortunately, close proximity to an airport and combined with the fact that it's a very, very large area just meant there wasn't the budget available or the time to make it in the first place. If we move on to the inside, as you know, it was made with Matterport. The Matterport was created using two cameras. So we used predominantly the Pro 2. Then in places, we would use the Leica BLK 360 Generation 1, which is the only Leica camera that Matterport software supports. The Leica has a sort of a lopsided set of abilities, I guess is the best way to put it, because its 3D capture functionalities are probably better than any camera that Matterport software supports. but its photographic capabilities are like less than 4K. So it is a very poor photograph that they create. So we use the two cameras with their own unique abilities to sort of support each other. The Pro 2 has probably the best capture resolution of any camera that is supported by Matterport, unless you're going to shoot DSLR. And it shoots like 6 4K photos and then sort of combines that together to make a 16K photo. Then you've got the Leica with the 3D, as I mentioned before.
There
Yeah,
was
go
a
ahead.
discussion in the We Get Around Network forum. Member Andrew Maida had posted about some discussion about the Pro 2 versus the Pro 3, and you weighed in on that. Could you talk us through perhaps either why you use the Leica BLK360
Yes, that's a good one.
first generation versus a Matterport Pro 3 camera, and the difference perhaps of the Pro 3 versus the Leica BLK360, or the Pro 3 versus the Matterport Pro 2. Can you take us through
Sure.
that from a Matterport service provider perspective?
Okay. I think this really comes down to when you started. So if you started as I did like 5 or 6 years ago, then you had a situation before the Pro 3 came out when you needed to do outdoor. So most of us would have bought a Pro 3 or told our client, sorry, we can't do that. And in that case, we just didn't have the option to turn our clients down. So we made that investment going back to 2020. So
about a $21,000 investment
yeah,
versus
it was pretty big
$6,000
at the
for the
time.
Matterport
Yeah,
Pro 3 camera. Yeah.
yeah. So when the Pro 3 came out, there was a lot of excitement because that really brought the price tag down. But to inform people of what's happened in between, the Leica Generation 1 is no longer being made. So if you're going to buy it, you're going to have to buy it secondhand. But that's not to say that that's a good option, a bad option, because a lot of the secondhand stuff that's on the market is really underused. So that's the reason it's on the market in the first place. So if you're very careful, you can get a pretty good camera for a very reasonable price. The reason I went for the Leica is obviously the Pro 3 wasn't available at the time. But if I was starting now and I had a big job like this one come up, I probably would buy a Pro 3. The only clear advantage the Pro 3 has over both the Pro 2 and the Leica is the speed. So the speed has also to be put against the fact that the battery needs to be recharged. So when you get to talk about batteries, then definitely the Pro 2 is the better one of the 3 cameras there. So if you're shooting a lot in one day, like say 8 to 9 hours, then yeah, the Pro 2 is going to be your workhorse, because
even with the swapping out of the batteries on the Pro 3 being swappable and the Pro 2 not being swappable.
Okay. Obviously, with the Pro 3, you could prepare a number of batteries and then just keep them charging and sort of perpetually keep them going. But although I don't want to say anything too negative about the camera in an interview, I have heard from a lot of people that when sustaining, like using the Pro 3 over a very sustained period of time, it is known to have other issues come up, and then they've had to swap to the Pro 2 anyway. So yeah, for that particular reason, I would save the Pro 3 for where it's needed most, as opposed to using it as the main workhorse, I think.
And could you just compare perhaps because you went into detail on this, on the Matterport Pro 3 camera versus the Matterport Pro 2 camera on the image quality?
Okay, so
This seemed counterintuitive to say, oh, new generation camera Pro 3, actually the image quality is not as good as the Pro 2. I think that was the point that you were making in the forum.
Okay, so image quality is something that is a pretty broad term. So we have to start with talking about resolution, or are we talking about HDR quality, for instance? So if we're talking about resolution, the capture resolution that the Pro 2 uses is much higher than the Pro 3. So this is maybe not so visible on a regular PC screen when you're seeing the two indoor shots lined up, because you're probably not going to use the Pro 2 much in outdoors. So, but also when you're, for instance, taking photographs from Matterport, as most people will know, there's a functionality where you can take snapshots within the tour. Until about 3 or 4 months ago, you could get up to 8K photos in any direction from the Pro 2, but you could only get 6K or so from the Pro 3. The difference there was the original capture resolution that the cameras use. So as I mentioned briefly before, the Pro 2 takes 6 skybox faces, so it's like a cube in 4K, whereas the Pro 3 does the same at half the resolution. So the result is still the same because they merge the photos into a 16K 360 image. So obviously the Pro 2 has to sort of compress that original capture image quality. But the difference is if you want to then take that information from the originals and then create a regular snapshot, that you have more to play with the Pro 2. Unfortunately, in the last few months, it seems that Matterport has made some changes to the platform. So now when you take those snapshots, they're all anchored to the Pro 3's abilities. So you can't get more than 6K anymore for those snapshots. But that just shows you the difference that's going on in the background there between the two cameras.
Okay. Would you have been at any disadvantage using a Pro 3 instead of a BLK 360?
Oh, I don't think so. But
have you used the Pro 3 instead of the Pro 2? So just being able to use one camera for the entire project?
I could have done. But the one thing that I would be concerned about is does my client have, or the two things I would say. One would be, does my client have a classic account, or do they have a newer account? If they have the classic account, then I can't service them with the Pro 3. That's one thing. The second thing would be if I use the Pro 3, I said I didn't really want to say anything negative about the camera, but if I wanted to exclusively use the Pro 3, I have heard that a number of people, not just on this forum, but also on Facebook groups, and even from people I know in Japan, that the Pro 3 has a habit of throwing a few technical difficulties, shall we say, from time to time. And whereas the Leica does throw technical difficulties at you too, they tend to be more about compatibility with Matterport, and they can be overcome by just turning the thing off and turning it back on again. The Pro 3's technical difficulties tend to be more mechanical. So yeah, I would feel risky about that.
For a project this size, you'd want to have a backup Matterport.
A backup at least, yes.
Yeah. So continuing our discussion of technology, there were other platforms, so and other cameras. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I don't know about platforms, but we use the well-known SDK MP Embeds to help to optimize the tour for our clients' needs. The menu you saw before. I didn't show it in my explanation, but it had a snapshots button. So not just the people who have access to the Matterport cloud account, but also regular users are able to take screenshots from any part of the tour that they want. So MP Embed came in useful for those things. It also behind the scenes too, when creating the tour, despite the fact that there was enough points to cover the entire tour to create the 3D image that you saw of the dollhouse. In some spaces, there would be holes in the walls, for instance, and so clicking at a certain point would send you flying across the other wings of the building. So we used MP Embed's 3D models function to plug those holes. Also, conversely, we found that because the space was so big, from time to time there was kind of noise appearing in doorways and things. So the noise there was actually becoming a physical obstruction to moving through a doorway. We'd been careful to make sure that we always scanned with the doors open, so we weren't sure why these were appearing, but they do. So what we did is we used a 3D model with a deep link attached to it. So the model itself is invisible. It's just like a sort of a rectangle in the doorway that if you click the doorway, you're instantly transported through the doorway to get to the other side. So it sort of took away that inconvenience for the user.
So that was a feature of MPM
That's
Bed,
correct. Yeah.
overlaid on top of the Matterport tours
Yes.
to deal with some particular challenges and magically made them go away.
Yes, that's correct. So yeah, this is sort of a behind the scenes feature.
Okay. Other
Finally, platforms. I don't know if it's a platform, but we included, as you saw before, ideas of what different layouts look like with 360 photos. We opted to take them with a DSLR, or actually it's a mirrorless camera, and combine them together using software such as PTGui, and they were all HDR shot with several exposures for each direction. So we also used a software called Photomatix to merge them. Then finally, Affinity Photos are sort of, make those final edits to put them in place. The reason we opted to do this and not use, let's say, the Pro 2's 360 capture was because a lot of time would move in between. So the space would look very different. It was hard to find the right spot. And also those black circles with 360 written on them that Matterport creates are not so intrinsic as I would like. So for instance, people see them, they press them, and they don't know how to get back out again. So I thought to try and keep the same kind of interface as we had for all the other tags that we had in the tool was probably the best way to go. So we included these tags in a different color, so people would be able to sort of intrinsically understand that they're seeing a pop-up, not another room in the tour.
Mm-hmm. Such a massive project. Problems that turned up while shooting?
I expected more problems than we had, but my client was very, very supportive and helpful. So basically, we had the rooms all to ourselves the whole time. So there was very little, very few cases where we had to stop work at any one time. The problems that sort of came up that sort of I hadn't considered beforehand. For instance, just one moment.
So I imagine some of the problems that you did anticipate with those very large spaces was
Yes.
Using the Matterport Pro 2 on this very wide open space. You probably even anticipated there was never a chance that you'd be able to successfully scan with the Matterport Pro 2 camera ginormous open spaces.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So
I was aware ahead of time that would be a challenge if I was trying to use the Pro 2. So hence,
what was your solution of how to actually scan the large spaces?
Yeah, so as I said before, we're using a Leica BLK 360. The Leica is sort of made for that sort of space. It takes a long time to shoot any one particular spot, but when it does, it'll take a massive radius. So you can reduce the number of scans that you need.
Did you mesh it up with the Pro 2 though, in terms of
That's correct.
Doing the perimeter of the interiors with the Pro 2 for the photography, perhaps? And
that's correct.
BLK 360 to actually capture the floor to ceiling and be able to have the scans connect. Yeah,
that's correct. If we talk about how I handled those rooms in particular, so if we have a rectangular room like this, maybe say 100 feet by, sorry, I'm just trying to get my my calculations right there.
Thank you for doing
feet.
Yes.
100 feet by say 700 feet or something like that. Let's just say we've got this huge room like this. And what I would then do is I would first of all, we initially need that one Pro 2 shot to be able to combine the two scans together. I don't know why, but just the way that the Matterport Capture app works, you have to have a Pro 2 shot before using any Leica shot after that. So we do that one shot, and then if there were multiple technicians working at the same time, we'd transfer that one shot to a second iPad. Then that shot would be like, say, in a doorway between the large open hall and another room. So then what we would do is we'd be both armed with that one Pro 2 shot, and separately we would start shooting with Leicas. So in different directions.
Did you have 4 team members shooting simultaneously? You had 4 buildings, and I noticed the tours were not all merged into one tour. So with 4 separate buildings, did you have 4 people shooting simultaneously at time?
We had, at any one time, we only had 2 people, but there were 3 of us. And initially, I had been asked, this is, the conversation's going to go back and forth a little bit, but initially when I was asked to provide like an offer for the tour, I was asked to be able to do it in 1 month. So I asked the 2 other members, they're not my employees, they are other MSPs that work in Osaka and Kyoto. I asked them to assist me. So we do that for each other when we get big projects, because if we don't, it's kind of hard to sort of appeal these large projects when you're just one guy on your own. So anyway, yeah, I asked the 2 of them to help me out through most of the scanning. And so what ended up happening is that we managed to make an offer where we could scan this huge space in just 14 days. And I think there was a month pause, I think, after that, where obviously the client was looking through the various tenders and the pricing and the functionalities offered, because they're all a little different. And finally, they came back
I'm sorry,
to us.
translate for me. Tenders in US means?
Sorry. Okay, so I might even be using the wrong term. So we had
a vendor?
vendors, yeah. So there were other offers being made. So ours won out in the end. But when they actually came back to us, they said, instead of a month, you can do it over 3 months, which was much better for me. So obviously, as I had already promised my subcontractors some work, we still did some of the areas together. But for the most part, it was myself alone after that. So as I was saying, 2 of us were armed with the Leica, and we have that initial Pro 2 shot. And then we start in different directions to scan the respective like large spaces. The way it works with the Leica, though, is that the Leica internally stores the scan information inside the Leica. So this is 2023, like autumn 2023. So the option to merge spaces in Matterport didn't exist at the time. But what you can do is, if you use the method we just talked about, you can transfer that internal information from the Leica to a different iPad. So as we both started with the same Pro 2 point, and we have, information that connects. So then we'd have one person with an iPad Pro who would be the master iPad, and another guy with the second iPad Pro who'd be the sub. The guy who was checking his work on the sub would then transfer the information from the Leica into the master iPad. So by this very complicated method, we were able to sort of scan 2 people at the same time on one Matterport space without having to ask Matterport to merge the spaces later. Then the final step was to fill the gaps with more photographic Pro 2 shots. So the Pro 2 shots, as you said before, we could sort of work our way around the outside, but we couldn't get into the middle. So we'd take a few of those photographic shots, which would actually stay in the tour, that people would actually be able to move into in the tour. And then from there, they'd be able to see not only the 3D created by the Leica, but the photographic element made by the Pro 2. We sort of tried to get some shots in the middle of the room, but it was sort of a very complicated process where you had to sort of work your way back to the middle by making a kind of a triangle, like a set of bowling pins, if you know what I mean. But just that middle point was always sort of evasive. So we only did that when we had time.
And what was the purpose of you were trying to do a Pro 2 scan in the middle of the space?
Yes, just one for show. So
because the
person,
quality of the photography is
that's
better
right.
than the Leica BLK 360, and
That's
therefore,
correct.
if you wanted to stand in the middle of the space and look around, you were trying to give people the best photographic experience if possible, which was technically quite a challenge because of a big wide open space and the
That's correct.
challenges of using a Pro 2. Okay,
So
with
this would have been a really good use case for a Pro 3.
Pro
That
3,
alone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I could think on a large space like this, you might have challenges with scans disconnecting.
With the Leica, never.
Never, but the Pro 2, I
Yeah,
meant,
of course, as I mentioned just now, yeah.
so was what would we call that? A failure, scan failure, a
Alignment errors.
alignment error.
Yeah.
Thank you. An alignment error. Was that a huge problem, or no, you anticipated that was part of your calculations of how long it would take to do the project?
I can only recall like once or twice where I got an alignment error. And both times with the Pro 2. So
Okay.
basically, yeah, with a good foundation laid by the Leica, it was very rare to get alignment errors.
Okay. Before I move on to a new topic, was there anything else in terms of challenges that was unexpected and how you solved the puzzle?
So there was just one occasion. I think I showed you a picture of a loading dock before. So the client had asked me to take a picture, just a regular photograph of the loading dock. And I had done that. It was a sunny day and the inside was obviously relatively dark. So I had done a 9 exposure HDR composition. But the result was good. But the client was so impressed with the other 360 photos I'd made that they wanted to do that loading dock spot in 360 as well. So I returned to the same spot a few weeks later and took the shot. But when I took the shot, there was scheduled maintenance going on inside the loading dock area. So I had to take the picture with the door closed. So I showed the picture with the door closed to the client, and they said they wanted me to come back and do it a third time. So I said, just hang on, let me see what I can do with Affinity Photo. And I took my first photograph, which was just like a regular photograph, not a 360 or anything like that. And I took the open part and I used a layer mask, to insert that into the 360 photo in Affinity. And it worked. So I actually managed to get the inside looking good and the outside looking good. It's just lucky I'd chosen more or less the same position to take both photos. Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's go back to the beginning. How did this project even come about?
So initially, I received this email from the center. They had a list of very specific requirements of what they wanted done, including equipment-wise. So I mentioned the Leica many times. That was actually written in their request. Then they told me that they'd been specifically looking for photographers in Kobe or Osaka because they understood that the tour was going to take a long time to capture. So they didn't want people staying long term in hotels nearby or anything like that. So yeah, that was the main reason that I was notified, because I'm one of a small number of Matterport photographers whose webpage sticks out in in this Osaka area. Also, I don't know for sure whether they saw it, but I'd done a lot of work in Kobe City before. For instance, they had a city hall, a wing of city hall, which was going to be torn down, and I used it on the one hand to practice, and on the other hand to give the city an archive of what the hall looked like, the building looked like. It was a very big building too, and I'd done it completely with the Pro 2. So yeah, it was good practice for me. But also, I think it's quite possible that they may have seen that tour before making the decision to reach out to myself as well.
Okay, so they reach out to you, they express interest. What happens next?
So I was given a viewing of the facility, and it struck me at the time just how much these people need the tour, because the viewing took an hour or so to walk around all the buildings and so on. And even then, it was sort of cut short. So yeah, I wasn't the only one who was given a viewing. The other, you said vendors before, were all separately given viewings independently, so we never met each other. But yeah, that was the sort of thing that happened next. Yeah.
All right. If I could ask you just maybe to sit up a little bit, I'm losing you on the bottom of the screen.
So go ahead. Sure.
Thank you. So, okay. So now it comes time to submit a quote. Is it by square foot? Is it by hour? Is it by day? Is it some other formula? How did you approach this project?
So it was kind of a combination of square foot and days, because from previous experience, I knew that with these big projects, if you just give it by the square feet or the meterage, that the client sort of allows it to stretch, the tour to stretch. They don't give you priority. Whereas if you are charging them by the day, your time becomes their money. So they try to help you a lot more to sort of speed the process, if you know what I mean. As it would turn out, my client was extremely helpful, so that I didn't need that sort of extreme measure to be taken. But at any rate, one other reason for sort of mixing the two formulas was because the client had square footage, or I should say meterage here in Japan, for the actual event spaces themselves, but they didn't have square footage for, say, the foyer area or the connecting hallways, etc. So that had to sort of be extrapolated from building total square footage. So we had like building total square footage for each building, and we had the actual exhibition space square footage, but there was a gap. So in one particular building's case that had large sort of waiting areas and stuff, 40% was actual, rented out space with that actual clear square footage, etc. But the other 60% was just like, a mystery. We didn't know how much was actually going to be scanned on any particular day. So I had to sort of make kind of a formula to work out just how much I was going to be scanning of each part for each day. So when I was doing this, I sort of thought charging by the square footage is going to be really hard for this building. So I better do this day by day, if you know what I mean.
So, so how did you figure out how many days that this project would take?
So we had the total building square meterage or footage. So what we did is we worked out from there how many days it was going to take. And so I decided, let's just say things are going to happen on the ground and we're going to move at a pretty, I wouldn't say slow, but measured pace. If that's the case, it's going to be like 35 days is what I determined to do this like 400,000 square foot space.
Was there
as it turned out, it took
number
30.
of feet per square foot, then you went through an
That's
actual
correct.
calculation. So
I think if we're talking square feet, it turned out to be something like 1,400 square feet a day or something like that. As it turned out, we'd probably move closer to 2,000 square feet a day anyway. So, but
per hour, not per day.
Sorry, per hour. Yeah, sorry, my numbers are out because I'm not accustomed to using square feet.
Square feet. So
yes, per hour. You're right.
At 1,400 square feet per hour times 8 hours.
That's correct.
came
So yeah,
divided by 400,000 square feet comes out to about 35 days.
that's right, as you say.
And then how many days did it actually take you?
So we managed to get that out in 30 days. But even so, it was quite a casual, I wouldn't say casual, but we were able to try new things. Like we had enough time to do that. So
And
yeah.
then I imagine that that wasn't 30 days in a row. So what was did it take 3 months of elapsed
Yes.
time?
So 3 months or maybe even a little over. So we would have a week of solid scanning at one point, and then maybe just one day in a separate week. And the reason is because there are many functions and many exhibitions going on, and it was all during the autumn period of 2023. So I guess it's probably similar in light climates like North America and so on. But once it cools down a bit, those big events sort of start up, and that was one of the reasons that we had to sort of stop and start. Yeah.
Um, and uh, and what's actually got delivered? Was it an MP embed link?
So the deliverables were, as you've seen them, mainly in link form, and also uh, we did provide them with the original data for that things that we could, like such as the photographs, also for the backup for the 3D Vista landing page, etc. Also, we provide them not a deliverable as such, but with a 1 year contract to give them analytics information every month about the usage of the tour. So functionality of MP Embed, you can use Google Analytics tags within the tour. So we provide them with a good, clear layout so they would know where people are looking from, the kind of numbers, the time, and how long they're spending in the tour, that sort of thing.
Yes, I
Yeah.
notice also there's a lot of annotation within the tour itself. Did you show your client how to do that, or did your client provide you the info and you did that?
Yes. So you're correct. The client did want a lot of annotation, and they provide us with all that information. So that's sort of part of our ongoing contract with them. So if
So that's
anything
part
comes
of
up,
hosting, support,
that's
maintenance,
correct.
and has there, I imagine there was a flurry to deliver the tour. There was a lot of information going back and forth, annotating the space. You deliver it in April 2024. Are you still annotating? Has there been a request for adding information?
So there hasn't been any requests that I've had to upload in the last few months, but there is something coming up because from time to time, as I mentioned before, it's a 30-year-old complex. So from time to time, there are walls that get repainted or some other machine is taken away or something like that, and they want that out of the facilities. So we have something like that coming up in the next few months. So we're in
Okay.
contact with MP Embed to ask them about how to substitute 360 photos within the tour without changing the 3D. So yeah, that will make our editing a lot easier than having to re-annotate the whole scan again just because we added a few new 360 photos or something.
Okay. And just going back to the quote, so I heard uh, 35 days. The project included 35 days. It included a 1 year support, maintenance, hosting. Is and or actually, is it within their account? Is it within their the client's Matterport accounts, or hosted in your account?
At the moment, it's saved in ours.
Your
So
account. Okay.
we offered them both options, but they said that they would prefer it handled at our end because that way, any edits or changes they want made, they can just request by email rather than have to learn how to do the process themselves. Yeah, and they
Great.
were quite happy with that.
So is there other components of cost of
Components of cost. Okay, so we talked about the actual time scanning. We talked about the editing. And the long-term ongoing contract with them. Um, I I guess if you were to sort of make one more component, I would say like the transport to and from the location. Those sort of go without saying, kind of
Travel
extra
expenses.
costs.
I was
Yeah.
just wondering if there was some type of overall project fee in addition to this, the scanning days.
Uh, no, there isn't. It's just
That all building out the
yes.
menus, building out 3D Vista, the
Okay.
indexing.
I sort of included that in editing because as I'm working predominantly on my own, I sort of think working on site is like the scanning itself. Working off site is like editing, for instance. But I
Okay.
guess,
So there was an editing
yeah,
fee. Yeah, a
that's
line item.
correct. Yeah.
Okay. Um, uh, uh, Daniel, we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about how the project started, how it was quoted, um, understanding what the client's needs, tools and technology, problem solving, workflow, execution. We've covered multiple technologies, the deliverables with the client. I think really the last thing I wanted to really ask you about is if you were to do this project again, and presumably you actually will, not, and I don't mean the going back and like, okay, that part of the building changed, but this really is a showpiece, not only for the Kobe Convention Center, but for your company, Maydantia. I would imagine that you're going to be asked to do similar projects on this scale and the scope. Looking back, are there things that you would say, oh, this is what I would just definitely do differently?
Um, if the tour was far from Osaka and I had to travel back and forth, I definitely would consider getting a Pro 3 next time around. Because although the client had the time to spend to push quality this time around, if I was doing this somewhere where I would have to book a hotel, for instance, I definitely, from a cost point of view, would consider getting a Pro 3, at least to sort of back up, if you know what I mean. Um, the the other thing that I would probably do if I was doing this again is I would likely call on more from my supporting subcontractors, so I could focus on other sales work as well to service other clients. Because one of the things that happened when I was doing this tour was that I spent a lot of time just on this tour. So uh, great for the immediate term, if you know what I mean. But in the long term, I needed to be keeping my eyes open for jobs to do in 3 months' time and so on like that. So yeah, I definitely would probably what we call uh, uh, horizontal connections in Japan. So like connections with like-minded MSPs are sort of important in that situation. Probably
Uh,
those two things.
I would maybe just ask you about a third, because you mentioned at the beginning of the show, photogrammetry. Could you talk about
Sure.
perhaps if the client had additional time or budget or whatever, what might that opening shot look like as opposed to the static rotation of Kobe Convention Center area?
It's good timing that you asked that actually. Could I share my screen again very briefly?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So because of time constraints, I'll just show you what is currently loading, well, actually processing at the moment. You can see at the right bottom, this scan is still being uh, made as such. It's using AI, so it's being trained at the moment. This is far from perfect, but I would love to try something like this with my client's work. It's a little bit, the movement is a little bit rough at the moment because it's still being processed, but this is 3D Gaussian splatting, and I hear that my provider, 3D Vista, is now able to use 3D Gaussian splatting. So we could use something like this, maybe at a slightly lower, I guess you'd say, resolution, to show our clients' exteriors. And this would be something that, well, not a lot of other places are actually able to do at the moment.
Okay, so if you don't
Far
mind,
from perfect, but
I'm
yeah.
going to take it off of screen share and just
Sure.
to describe that a little bit. So instead of we're in the present world, we moved from wherever the camera was to wherever the camera was.
That's correct.
Somehow your screen is frozen on me, Daniel. So I know you're still there and I can hear you. Just know your screen's frozen.
Okay.
So instead of moving from scan point to scan point, and that's a limitation today, that that the Gaussian splat would enable the complete free form of moving through the space. And since the scan that you were showing was actually in the midst of processing, and it felt a little bit herky-jerky and slow. In the actual commercial implementation, it would be silky smooth, and the ability to fly up or down or around into the Kobe Convention Center in that particular example. So as opposed to having a static image, you could actually move in or move out, move up, move down, and maybe have a little bit more theatrical drama to being able to visit a space. Is that sort of what we're talking about?
That's sort of what we're talking about. And at this point, because the technology is a little bit difficult to capture on the ground, I would probably focus just on the exterior. But for sure, I'd love to incorporate something like this into a virtual tour.
Awesome. Before I move on, before we wind up, is there just anything we haven't talked about? You go, oh, but we really should cover.
No, I think we've covered just about everything, but
Yeah.
I know as soon as I hang up that a lot of things will come to mind.
Okay, you can always post in the We Get Around Network
Yeah.
forum. I just want to really say, for our viewers, particularly Matterport service providers that are real estate photographers that are used to documenting homes that are 3,500 square feet, tackling a 400,000 square foot project introduces entirely new challenges and complexities. From dealing with large open spaces to managing multiple technologies. I think what Daniel his experience has shown, it just really is kind of an invaluable lesson for the community, for anyone that's looking to expand their business into large commercial projects. Careful what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And it's just not a matter of, oh, well, it's 3,500 square feet. This is 400,000 square feet. I'll multiply that out and boom, I'm done. It's like you could get yourself in big trouble if you really are not at this level of skill that you obviously have developed over a number of years, not just with Matterport, but with many technologies and even new technologies that like Gaussian splats that you're looking at. So Daniel, thank you for being back on the show.
Thank you.
We've been visiting with Daniel Brown, president of Meidansha Inc. For Daniel in Osaka, I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum, and you've been watching WGAN TV live at 5. Ohio gozaimasu.
Thank you very much.
Konnichiwa, doi tashimashite.